Hi, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Thought About AI Agents. Today, with me, we have John Brazier. John has spent the last 25 years at Oracle building their knowledge base, dealing with millions of support tickets, and helping them build out and maintain their technical documentation. And today, we have an interesting topic. We're going to be discussing how AI is changing the role of the technical writer in the workspace. How does this translate into managing of documentation at Oracle scale, at large enterprise scale, as well as translations and management of actual content, and what things go into the modern enterprise documentation stack? Finally, we'll introduce the role of the knowledge orchestration. That will probably be the next iteration of technical writer, who everybody is trying to replace with AI. But what we end up with is basically a bunch of AI generated flop. And if you feed AI with that AI generated flop, AI will give sloppy answers, which is what happens very frequently, especially if you talk to things like Microsoft Copilot. You know what I mean. So, John, I'll let you introduce yourself a bit,
Thank you.
and then we'll get started.
Thank you. So I spent 25 years at Oracle leading a global team of technical writers around the application documentation, and AI is certainly present, although it is quite common that I hear AI is going to replace technical writers and the whole documentation type of organizations. I disagree that it will take over to a degree that we're thinking. Simply, the enterprise level software documentation requires human interaction. It would be exactly as you said. It would be garbage in, garbage out. Therefore, it is imperative that we understand what is involved in the enterprise level development of documentation.
So, how big was the documentation problem at Oracle? How many languages, products, pages, manuals? How big was the team?
Great. So my team was a part of a larger documentation organization with supporting the EBS applications. 20 writers, managers, directors. The entire eBusiness Suite library of documentation consists of 394 books, user guides, implementation guides, administration guides, API guides, technical guides, etc., each of which are translated to some degree with few exceptions. Older products aren't translated. Most products are translated at least into 10 major languages. This is interesting. I was pulling some numbers together this morning. 394 books with roughly 500,000 words per book. Translation costs, if we were to translate a book from scratch, it's never been translated. The cost of translating one of those is somewhere about $500,000. So I actually put together a little bit of data here. So if we have the logistics area consisting of 6 products: inventory management, warehouse management, yard management, shipping, mobile, and transportation management. Those 6 guides with three specific guides for each product. That's a user guide, an implementation guide, and an administration guide. That's 21 guides with 500,000 translatable words at a translation rate of this is a middle of the road, 12 cents per word. The initial translation costs approximately 600,000 per guide, or 12 million total dollars across all of those products. That's if they were never translated, and that's what the cost would be. Now, over time, the next, say, release, we would update the same guides. but that translation cost, kind of depending on the impact of new features or enhancements to existing features. So we're changing content that already exists. The second year, it's at about $2 to $3 million. Third year, 1 to 2. It drops from there simply because you're introducing new enhancements to existing features for the most part from there forward. So so although humans, AI can help optimize this, humans are absolutely essential because translation is all based off of paragraph IDs. One paragraph in any given translated book. If any character is changed or a new character introduced, say the first translation went through and we missed a comma, and the next version we put out, amongst other things, we add that comma. There's an ID for that paragraph called a PID that is unique. And that PID, just because we added that comma, changes. That flags it for translation. The entire paragraph is retranslated. So let's say you have a paragraph of 200 words and you add a comma. All 200 words are retranslated. That is the most significant cost to the documentation, to any enterprise level documentation. It must be translated, and the cost is anywhere between 6 cents and 30 cents per word that it's translated. So criticality of a human being trained with the knowledge that translation is impacted enforces the need to be concise with our writing. So everything that we write, we try to write as concise as possible. Changes, say, to standards, our own internal style guide. For example, we had in bold font names of fields on a UI. Any name of a field is in bold. Well, that came to be in our style guide about 10 years ago, but these books, some of them were written, most of them were written prior to that. If we went through and added bold, it would retranslate the whole thing. So translation costs are always there. They're always in the back of our heads, and it can lead to a serious expense that is unforeseen. The translation takes place after publication. It takes place after our, say, a given release. Everything then goes to translation and then is reprinted, if you will, in some form or fashion into that language. And different languages cost more to translate content from English to Japanese than it does to German. So the translation cost is the one area in all of this AI taking over where I don't see it possible in anytime soon. The nuance there that's required by the users, the writers for that content is paramount.
So, what happens when AI starts to generate docs at scale? So, I'm sure Oracle has introduced LLMs into the and agents into the writing process. So, what have they like? What introduced, and what efficiencies have that brought, and what complexities have that brought for you as a human in the loop who is looking at that AI slop that's being generated?
Okay, so in the organization that I was in, AI agents had not yet been pulled in to do anything except improve the efficiency and the effectiveness of the process, of the writing process. The agents as I see them, and Oracle's certainly got the AI agent worked out, but it did not exist. And as far as I know in this moment, it doesn't exist in the process. It is 100% human with AI simply supporting as the writer requires it, needs it, wants it to help with questions around say business examples and such, because the whole writing process is based around a style guide that is unique to each enterprise. We have one documentation style guide at Oracle. That style guide has to be adhered to. There at the time was not an agent that existed. In fact, I was involved in a meeting the week I was notified of being laid off, September 2nd. That week I had a meeting with the style guide review board to introduce just a search feature so writers can easily utilize what's in the style guide. But I can see where that can be incorporated using an agent, but right now it doesn't. So the writers know to go find in that guide, in the style guide, how to correctly write whatever it is that they're writing. So the impact right now isn't there. There is no impact, but I did attempt with prompting, simply prompting. Agents weren't available yet. And to just write the content, giving it information about a feature from development. So development writes up, say, a functional design document, which is their guide on how they're going to code this new feature. It's also a important document for the writers to understand the new feature so that they can effectively place the content within the appropriate guide. And that, because again, we're talking mostly about enhancements to existing features that have already been written. So to add new functionality to an existing feature by providing basically building a model with functional and technical design documents, it doesn't know where to put them in existing doc. There is no way for it to know. And that this is kind of the crux of the problem with replacing human technical writers and leaders with AI, is the knowledge of where it belongs within the existing guide. There's anything like that has to be created by a human, which can then be used as a model for maybe 50% efficiency. There's too much nuance that comes with it. The trust, the understanding of the feature that has been enhanced. To write effective documentation around an enhancement to an existing feature requires an understanding of the existing feature first. Then we can start talking about how to write about this enhancement to it. And again, every change, every enhancement we make requires translation. So if AI is let loose, it doesn't care about money. It's not being told by its director, look, you have a budget. Your team can't go over X dollars in translation, which equates to X words. And again, this is where we bring in writers having to be concise. You can certainly ensure that the AI is writing as concise as possible, but it's the human mind that understands that degree of conciseness to limit and stay within that budget. AI simply is not yet ready for that I can see. It's just not. There's too much that's involved.
Well, I mean, AI agents are writing a lot of code these days, right? And they're able to identify context of where to insert that code, write functional code, put it in, test it, ship it, right? So having
Do you think that happens without human intervention?
human is definitely in the loop. I mean, there are people who do something called vibe coding, where they
Sure,
sit around and
sure.
they talk to it, but it's not the same, right? But
No,
if you want any kind of like decent output, you will have to sit and you will have to watch what
that's
this
right.
AI is writing.
That's
Like
right.
I use AI to write like developer documentation when I ship new features, for example. And it writes slop. And the biggest problem with AI slop is that AI slop goes into AI slop. It creates good enough of a context for AI to understand itself, but then it sometimes it starts going in circles and contradicting itself, and then it just loses the point. So the biggest problem with AI writing documentation is context poison. And if you don't want to have context poisoning, then you need to have human in the loop. So we, at a certain point when we were having a discussion, we were talking about knowledge versus wisdom. And I guess this is something that you could probably unpack for me and
Yeah,
tell me a bit like what is like where is this wisdom that the technical writer brings? Because whether we like it or not, this role will be replaced with AI, and it's going to be for worse rather than for better until we learn how to basically elevate the role of a technical writer to be able to control those AIs
right.
better. So maybe if you can talk about knowledge versus wisdom.
Sure. Yes, I love this analogy. It's not mine. I don't remember where I heard this first, but the difference between knowledge and wisdom. Knowledge is knowing that a tomato is a fruit. Wisdom is knowing not to put it in a fruit salad. That analogy in and of itself kind of wraps it up because think about how technical we're talking about here. We're talking about code, right? AI does not have the ability to determine the difference between those two things. It just so knowledge, we can put documentation out there that just is procedural, do this, do that, do this, and click go. That I don't think AI has would have a problem with. It's the conceptual content that's written for the user to understand why they're doing what they're doing. Why do I need to, whatever procedure in this application? The wisdom comes in that conceptual content. Procedures are step by step instructions that you do not deviate from. That doesn't require wisdom. That's knowledge. And as we discussed, knowledge is no longer of value because of AI, right? My knowledge isn't of value. My wisdom is. So so for you to create documentation for your code can only produce what is in the model, right? What you've given it, and none of that is conceptual. Upload the code, say to Notebook LM or something, and just say, write me the documentation on how to use this, but it's already there. You've had to have provided that unless you've provided conceptual information, which is not part of the vibe coding. It can't write that. There's the wisdom.
Mm.
That's the wisdom. Here's another example, real world example. Back to translation. When enterprise level application documentation is written, it's not just written in Word or Notepad++. There are content management systems, documentation development systems that are specific to writing documentation at the enterprise level. Now, this includes what are called PIDs, paragraph identification. those PID numbers, if they change, will trigger translation. That the wisdom of knowing whether or not to add back in that comma that I was talking about earlier or not doesn't exist in AI. That's a human, like a human's going to know whether it changes the concept of the paragraph or not. If I put the comma here or if I remove a comma, it can change how it's read, thus the meaning. AI doesn't have that. That wisdom is not there. The knowledge that a comma should be here is even questionable, whether or not it knows. As we've talked, it hallucinates, which is the biggest problem. How many times have you said, you know, are you sure or something? And it's like, oh, but that I think is the underlying issue here is the understanding the meaning behind the purpose of the application and why, and in sometimes in different terminology, why and how an application is implemented, the administration of it and used. Again, the step-by-step knowledge is pretty simple. It's like it's like setting up anything in your house. You get an instruction book, it's just there. But only you understand why you bought it and what it's used for and so forth. That's where the wisdom is. An AI does not have that type of wisdom per se. Does that make sense?
That makes sense. So, but now we are in the age where companies are implementing AI to write documentation, right?
Sure.
And they're burning money on AI features. They create all this AI tools and everything, writes stuff for you. The problem is, of course, comes back to it being sloppy and poorly written, and it's only as good as the context that you give it. So, what do you see as kind of the evolution of the role of technical writer at this stage? Where, because technical writer role is now being less in demand because executives are saying, well, let AI write all our documentation and it's fine unless there is compliance involved. And then if your documentation is wrong, they can
Yeah.
fine you. But so what's
Yes.
some of the things that you see coming up with these agents and people starting to leverage them more? What are some of the safeguards they can put in place to protect their knowledge assets?
More than anything, everything needs to be reviewed by a human. Everything. Because of the common hallucinations that we know of. Even putting, if you built a model, so the AI only knows what you've given it to know, right? I love Google Notebook LM because you can just upload, say, a PDF and then ask all the questions you want about it. So if you provide, say, a PDF of code to the AI and say, hey, write documentation for this, it'll do it as you've seen. It's the quality and the customers, it's their first glimpse into the software. They're looking at the documentation. And if the documentation reflects directly on the company. If my documentation is not good, it's assumed the software is not going to be good. If the documentation is written based on the software, especially by AI, and that documentation is difficult to read, the comprehension isn't there, it reflects poorly. It impacts the view of the company and how it's perceived. Now, safeguards can be put in place right now, and those safeguards are humans. And it is literally reviewing every word that is spit out from the AI. It must be reviewed unless, and I think this is where you're kind of going, and I think this is where, and I agree with you, companies are saying, how much can we save if we get rid of the documentation team, the technical writers? They're pretty spendy. So how much can we save? Ooh, Yeah, let's just use AI for that. Right up until revenue recognition comes around, which is revenue recognition is a regulation that basically, among other things, states that you cannot sell and recognize the revenue from a sale of software if it doesn't work. If the software doesn't work and you ship it and you sell it to somebody and it doesn't work, you can't recognize that revenue until it works. Documentation is also part of that. There must be supporting documentation so users know how to use it. So you can't recognize that revenue. This is where you could run into legal problems because you could ship documentation that supports the software. If the documentation is written by AI or a human and it's garbage, that is a problem. Revenue recognition cannot be sought if the software is not whole, and that includes the documentation. So again, you put out documentation with it, thinking, yep, we're covered. But if customers cannot use that documentation, sure, now you're running into all sorts of legal issues. It's that understanding the meaning and intent and the user. Who's the audience? AI doesn't ask that. Who's the audience for this content? That is the biggest question that kicks off any doc project. Who's the audience? For example, release notes. That's a different audience than a what's new document, which is a different audience than a user's guide. Understanding who the audience is to start off is critical. It's just that doesn't ever come up. That's never asked. So, although I'll say this, I agree with you that it is happening. Companies are using AI right now to write their documentation. Enterprise level companies are not, and they won't. The legal ramifications of incorrect documentation or incomplete, it's too big at the enterprise level, right? If I volunteered for projects over the years to write documentation for shareware kind of software that doesn't have documentation, that's where I see, yeah, on a smaller scale, that documentation would be just fine. But on an enterprise level, when you've got you sell your enterprise software that covers every product, every application needed to run a business, from financials to HR to procurement and so forth, say at Boeing or at OpenAI or at Oracle. If it doesn't work, or if the documentation is not clear and users can easily enter, say, an order using the documentation, the enterprise software company knows better. You can't have a Cisco or a Boeing or Lockheed Martin unable to use software because the documentation is garbage.
So I guess that's one of the things that people get catastrophically wrong about AI and documentation, because when it comes to compliance and risk, the bigger the business, the less of this risk you want to take on yourself, and the
Absolutely.
less you want to, because the fines are bigger, right? Like, what are they going to fine a two people startup? Like,
And
nothing.
reputation.
Yeah.
If Boeing is saying, I guess I don't know if the software is okay, we can't figure out how to use it, you're not going to be selling to anybody else, right? I mean, that's the whole. I see AI reshaping the role of the technical writer and the documentation team as a whole, the information development, if you will, the enhancement, augmented intelligence, not automation, I guess. Writers will change from from being purely writers to content engineers, right? Focusing on prompts, templates. I think templating is a big key here, because if you can get a template down that you can have as part of the learning, the LLM, and then writers can prompt to use template ABC and create documentation around this feature that it already has access to, say the technical design of the software, etc. Less reviewing and editing probably, but still an absolute requirement to edit that and review it, which is common in every content publication. Think about if you were to write a novel and one of the big publishing companies decided they wanted to pick you up, the amount of editing that it goes through, it's a year's worth of editing from one or multiple editors, humans.
Mm.
You can't just throw stuff. There's too much at risk, especially when you're developing software at the enterprise scale. And the analogy again that Boeing says, yeah, we got their software, but we don't know how to use it because there's no supporting documentation. There's nobody else that's going to invest in your software. So it's imperative. It's imperative that there is a team that oversees this mechanical function.
Yeah, this makes perfect sense. And I mean, in the long run, if AI starts generating documentation for AI, probably it will need human in the loop. But the problem is, again, it always comes down to context poisoning and AI hallucinating and writing garbage, and then that garbage gets passed down to other AIs like broken telephones. And the same happens with humans.
Yeah,
But if you have templates and you give it the context, it will generate decent enough of a starting point for you to work off. But you still have to review it and work on it. And I think
that's a
that's
great point. That's a great point. It can generate the initial draft. This is where I was looking at. So we have individual contributors that are numbered by experience, and these are job codes per se. You have a IC1. That's somebody straight out of college, never had a job. They've gone to college. They're going to be a technical writer. That is it. They are an IC1 or an IC2 with a year or so in. Those roles, I think, will go away because AI can do that. AI can create a draft. And so if you take the scenario of when I was in this scenario in 2019, we hired, and this person came onto my team. 2 years worth of technical writing at another, tech company. Every single thing that writer produced that was to be published, I reviewed it as well as one or two peers multiple times through revisions. That's what it would take. Instead of paying that IC or IC2 generate those initial drafts that will need to be reviewed and edited, you could get rid of that cost and use AI. Just have AI generate that because it demands the same amount of human review. When you get into, say, an IC3, where you've got 4 or 5 years in this, and from there up, you can't replace them. You cannot replace them with AI as it stands right now, no matter what. You just can't. There's too much human wisdom that is required in these situations. When we talk about knowledge management support notes, here's where it gets interesting. That's where AI can come in. Technical writers aren't necessarily involved in SARS, service requests. So a customer has a problem. It's not with the doc, right? The software, they're trying to do something, but they found a bug. Well, they call support. Support creates a ticket, a bug, they support a ticket. When it's resolved, that ticket is published in their support, the knowledge management support system. So other support, other customers can see it and don't have to go through the process of recreating the fix. We have a fix. That content is rarely, it's never reviewed. It's very rudimentary and very uh, written by and kind of developers. There's developer. I used to refer to myself as a translator of dev speak to English because developers speak a different language. Yeah, they just do. They talk about the code. They talk about things that customers do not need to know. Therefore, my job is to translate what they're saying in an email into published English content, if you will, publishable content. But when you get into those support systems, that's where AI can write a lot of documentation and replace. In fact, this is where I'm seeing, and I'm sure you are too, a huge change is in this when you reach out to support. Good luck getting a human because it's all AI. Even internally, the past, say, 6 months prior to being laid off, our internal support was all AI. You could get to a human if you knew how, but in general, it was all AI through Slack, integrated into Slack. It's not to say that the AI wasn't doing, the agent didn't, solve some issues in a relatively reasonable time frame, but for the most part, it was the most frustrating thing in the world when your laptop's having a problem and all you have is this AI agent that's just prompting you as quickly as you're prompting it and not coming up with the answers that you need. That's but see that documentation that's created when a problem is resolved, that probably already, I know it is in many companies, that's already replaced by AI.
Yeah, and I mean, I think whenever a customer wants to have like a chat and they start
Yes.
chatting to something and you hear it's a bot, you just don't want to speak to it because 99% historically interactions with those chatbots have been painful, time wasting initiatives. And
Yes.
when they sell it to big corpo is like, hey, we're going to replace the support calls. But the problem is, yes, you are getting, it's not a ticket deflector, it's a customer deflector. Your customer leaves and they're angry at you because you just gave them a crappy service. It's reported as solved, but the reality of it, you're frustrating your customers. We've tried
Yes.
to launch chatbots that are like just LLM chatbots, work of your documentation and doxing. In our experience, they work, but they're not super. They're not what people thought they would be. And it's really hard to get good context into that bot where that bot is super aware and can solve problems. But if you can get, for example, context of your like top 50 queries into that bot and it's the same and equip it with
Yeah.
tuples to help assist it, that would make it invaluable. But if you're just, but majority of the companies don't do that. What they do is they just set up a bot, you talk to it, and it just gives you those worst. Their knowledge base is already bad, and it pulls the knowledge out of their knowledge
Yes.
base, gives you those bad answers.
Yes.
So you're getting AI slop on top of AI slop, and you're just sitting there. You're like, why? Can I speak to a human? No, like
Yeah.
we replaced it with AI.
Exactly. So the knowledge management system, KM, it's part of any enterprise software company. Everybody has a knowledge management. And we look at it when we go look for help on something. We look for support and you end up in their knowledge management system, which is a, uh, the knowledge management system is a, um, it is a box of information, data that's not documented, which is how it ended up in there. Customers go to the help on their screen. It's not there. They'll find the PDF, right? Let's just say it's a PDF, a user guide, and they'll look and they can't find it, the answer in there either. It's likely in the knowledge management system because you're likely not the first customer to come across this and it not be there. Now, because it's not in the doc, that's referred to as a gap. We have a doc gap. There's content that should be in here that's missing. Bugs are logged so that the documentation team knows about this and gets it in there. But that doesn't happen. There's too much pressure on the new features and enhancements and get those documented in this amount of time. Yeah, it's always high pressure, right? The deadlines are always, it's crazy in this world. So the knowledge management system is unorganized. It can't even an employee struggles to find information in the knowledge management system because they're all just documents that anybody can create, not just the support team. Anybody can create them, like, with certain permissions, but it varies. It's development, it's the quality team, it's the doc team, it's the support team that are creating these notes, or notes I call them, on these topics that, again, that system is unorganized. The notes are not structured, well written. So to say, let's have an agent that is connected to or uses our KM system as its LLM, that sounds great. But if the source is garbage, that's all it can produce. That's all the AI can produce. If the source that it has, whatever you've got in the model, if it's not correct, if it's not well organized, the AI can't be. So you end up on a support bot that is utilizing, say, you're on the support bot on Microsoft and it's connected to the support system and it still can't answer your question. It's those issues. It's like indexing, if you will, for a more simple term, right? If your database isn't indexed, it's going to take a lot longer to find the answer, to find the data. And that is, I think, what you're pointing at when you say, it's erroneous data it's spitting out erroneous data because that's all it has. That's all it
Oh
can go
yeah,
with. And the
exactly.
nuance, just the understanding of, I love this. Think of this sense of urgency. AI has no sense of urgency. It's not human. That's a human thing. In technical writing, we have deadlines, just like we work hand in hand with development as software is being developed. As new features or enhancements are being developed, the documentation team, the technical writers work directly with the developers, directly with the product management team, directly with quality, etc. And when there's a sense of, when something is urgent, if you don't have a sense of urgency, you simply won't work there very long. You've got to understand the sense of urgency when this is due. Here's an example. Earlier this year, U.S. administration pushed out one or two executive orders. I say that facetiously. One of them impacted us, an executive order where we had to go through our product HR documentation and change a certain term to reflect another term because this executive order mandated that. It didn't say Oracle. No, it was in general that, and I don't even want to go into that because it's so political and all that. But think about that. Here's an executive order. Now, executive orders take place they are in effect 90 days after they're signed. So when an executive order is signed today that says this needs to be the case moving forward, it's actually a 90-day period, not right now, 90-day period. But at that 90 days, you have to be in compliance with that executive order. And we ran into that in the middle of a normal documentation development cycle. We're creating new content for new features, enhancements for our upcoming EBS release that was just released last week. But this came up right in the middle of our process. So we had writers that had to stop what they were doing for this release and get this done. That sense of urgency is on the writer. Once it's introduced and meetings have taken place and everybody understands what needs to happen, it's up to that writer to get that done as well as their other work. AI doesn't have that sense of urgency or prioritization without simply being told, which I guess is the same thing as, say writers that were reporting to me. I was the one telling them what was priority. So I can see where I could do that with AI, but giving it a sense of urgency, hell, there are people who don't have a sense of urgency. AI certainly doesn't. Machines don't. No
Well, it
way.
will pretend like it does. It will pretend like it does, and if you teach it, it could, in theory. But the thing is, if
Yeah.
people ignore it, and if you ignore it enough, like, look, right now, AI is already firing people in some organizations. They set up an AI. It was working as a manager of people, and then it started to fire people. But again, these are experiments, right? It's like this
Yeah.
person, she
Brand
stepped
new.
down as the CEO of her company, and she put AI as the CEO of her company. Again, it's you can do a lot of things for publicity, right? And they'll publish a paper
Yes.
about how great you are. But the reality of it is, like, you have to think with like, here's the thing. If AI deletes production, it deletes the production database. Who is the idiot in this equation? You or AI? You, because you let it delete the production database. So who can be held accountable and who can be held responsible if there is a compliance mistake in your documentation?
That's right.
Who is going to be accountable? Who's going to be responsible? Is it going to be AI? No. Is it going to be like OpenAI, Anthropic? No, they don't care. You are responsible for every word that goes into your documentation, and if it is not compliant, it's on you.
Yeah.
If you fail an
I
audit,
get
it's on you.
fired,
Yeah,
not the
yeah.
AI.
Yeah, you get fired. AI did
Even
a great
though,
job. You just
right.
failed to
And this
comprehend it.
goes this goes all the way up to the C-suites because that's where the decisions are made. That's where the decision is made to replace writers with AI, even if it's selective for this product or that product or what have you. Those decisions are made at the C-suite in that area. Yeah. So who's at fault? Not them, not the AI. Say the doc manager. That's a good one. They're expendable. We'll just replace them with AI anyway. It's a trend. What we're going through, AI, think about how where we are today compared to when OpenAI, let people start using GPT. Now, I got my OpenAI account in January of 2023. Think about how far we've come with AI since then. Where's it going to be next year? Where's it going to be in 5 years? And it might make this whole conversation irrelevant because it can now do all the things that I've said it can't do. The sense of urgency, conceptualization, contextual understanding, good judgment. It's able to collaborate cross-functionally with the quality AI, not team, I guess, by this point. Maybe, but I don't see it. I think it is so new and it's people liken it to the invent of the internet. Look at where we've come since 96 and where the internet is today compared to where it started. AI is moving at quadruple that speed just on its own, right? Just on its own. I mean, how many things have come out of just the term AI? You've got how many different types of AI, right? And now we're talking about these agents. The agents are simply workflows. We already have workflow. We have workflow systems. We have a product. I say we, I'm not with the company, but there's products that are workflow. So when a purchase order is cut, the workflow kicks in and it sends a message to the purchasing manager for review and approval, and either rejects or approves. And based on that, the workflow is going to take it somewhere else to do the next step and so on and so forth. That's what these agents are. They're workflows. They they take and go and do things for you instead of just telling you how, right? That's the difference. It will actually take action. You give it permission to take action. That's terrifying. It's like you just said, if we gave AI autonomy over a database, what's going to happen when it decides that it's going to, improve this database somehow and it corrupts? What then? Not just what
Then
then,
somebody
but
has to
who
recover
then?
it. Yeah.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
like it's
Well, look, we had this big outage like 2 days ago. AWS went down like
yeah.
US East one, and the CEO of AWS was bragging how all this code they're pushing into production is AI generated. So apparently, whatever they've generated broke production, and like half of the internet went down. Like most of the services went down, and who is there to blame? Are they going to blame the LLM that wrote this crappy code and pushed it? Because I'm
Well,
sure it was some engineer with Claude Code who said, "Ah, okay, let's just like you only live once. Let's push to production," and
yeah,
that's it. The internet goes down,
right. And it
but they'll
did.
never tell you, right?
No, no, they won't. And no matter what you read, because there's several articles about how and why, but no matter what you read, it's always questionable propaganda. So unless you're the person in the seat, you just never know what if your reading is correct. But let's assume that it was because of what you said. They're coding all this with AI and blah blah blah, and that brought it down. It won't change anything. They're not going to go, okay, bring all of them back, bring all the people, humans, you're all rehired. Not a chance. They'll rectify the problem and they'll safeguards in place only to wait for the next problem. That's that's an issue. I can fix this problem and I can ensure it won't happen again, but I have no idea what's coming around the corner. This is new. It's all so new.
And we don't even have agentic like running at scale yet. Imagine if this was running at scale and it goes and introduces 1,000 problems, and then you only can have other agents fix agents.
That's what
So large cloud providers are happy because this is all LLM costs. But yeah, but
that's true.
it's just the
People talk
scale
about how
amplifies. They
AI is,
amplify the scale of the
yes,
problem.
yes. Well, there's the stories about how AI is going to create its own AI, right? Okay, well, that's cool, and I suppose it's plausible. But what you just said, AI being autonomous, creating other AI agents to do its work, because I mean that's what human as all as smart as we all are, as with the human brain, we've decided it would be better to have a machine do this for us. Well, if we build a machine that is smart as a human, it's also going to build an AI agent to do its job, right? So now you've got, like you said, you've got AI agents building AI agents, building AI agents with no concept of, hey, you remember that bug back that came up and we went in and we fixed and we put up those guardrails? It doesn't have that. It doesn't have that, right? How many
It could,
meetings?
but there is context, but it has limited context window, and
It
they've
is
introduced things like
limited.
context compression, so it
Yep.
will get better, but it still can't remember everything. And the biggest problem is the scale. The bigger the scale, the scarier it is. And soon we're going to have
And the
autonomous
risk.
businesses, which is, yeah, the companies that are completely operated by AI agents. They will launch that. So it will be a completely agentic enterprises that serve, for example, other agentic enterprises in the cloud, and they'll have their own agentic economy, right? But how does it help us as humans? Like, where do we fit in? Like, they're trying to, speed run humanity at this point. That's what it is.
That's sure. And where does that put us? It puts us in direct competition with machines, not in, the Terminator way, but we've created our own competition, because even so, if it ends up that AI can, in fact, and does in the future, everything we're talking about, and does it well, wouldn't it also take out your strategy executives, your
Yeah.
CFO, your CTO? Those people, you think they're going to let that happen? Right? I'm,
Well, they deferred AI regulation. I think that
yeah,
Congress said, okay, we're going to defer it. But
yep,
that doesn't mean they're not going to bring it back. Once these politicians see that they're about to be replaced, you're going to see those guys pick their briefcases up, run, and pass legislation to regulate AI. It's a matter of time.
instantly.
Instantly.
You're right.
And so
You're
the
right.
CEOs, all these people, as soon as they feel like, okay, they're being replaced. Oh, well, they can't replace us.
That
Okay, we
it'll
have to
change
regulate.
everything.
They'll put like horrible regulations on this to make sure that they
Absolutely.
stay in power.
That's correct. That is absolutely correct. And until we get to that point where it's good enough to take out senior VPs, just senior VPs, not executive VPs, not the CTO, not the CFO, but just the senior VPs, that's when it'll change again, because money and power will remain as long as whoever has that is in charge. You're not going to take my money and power from me. Neither is a machine, if I can help it. And if I'm in that position to make a decision whether or not we're going to replace, the doc team with AI, and I know by quick calculation that's going to impact me in a year, it's going to take over my job, I won't do it. I won't. Right. And so throwing in the regulations again that right now I think are out, just simply so there's an open slate of experimentation. It'll close down real quick. We've seen it in politics. We've seen it in business. Give a hint that their power will be reduced, not taken away. They'll change things. Right? This is what, yeah, I mean, it's just, once you impact the powers that be, once you impact their livelihoods or threaten, they'll jump. But until then, no, because the purpose here is to get the stock to go and stay as high as possible. And to do that, we need to show bigger numbers every single quarter. And to do that, it comes a point where we can't raise the price on our software anymore. So we need a machine that we don't have to pay to take over salaries. I mean, I can't imagine the salary of some of these companies, what they put out, 200,000 employees, right? Like, so if you can replace them, your revenues and your numbers will go up. But if once it gets too close to the executives that make these decisions, it'll stop.
Oh, yeah, it's almost
That's
like,
where the regulations will come in.
yep. So 3 to 5 years, you'll see it properly
That's what I think.
regulated. But for now, people will have to deal with layoffs. And again, we haven't
Yeah,
seen the fallout. We haven't seen the fallout of documentation at scale yet. And I think this is one of the things that people are like. People are like, you have all the startups vibe coding their documentation. They are
yep,
speedrunning SOC 2, which means that they
sure.
basically use LLM and generates all of your documentation. They don't
And that,
even follow the documentation. They
nope,
just speedrun it, and the auditor comes in. It's probably also an agent. Also, they're speedrunning it because it's fun. But the problem is,
and it's
if
cost effective, right?
yeah,
You don't need
if
to
something
spend the
happens,
time and money. You can get your product out so much faster. But again, if that documentation is not helpful, customers aren't going to buy your product. If they can't figure out how to use it, who's going to buy your product? Well, but we generated it so fast and got it to market so quick, and look at how the market reacted to that. But how's the market going to react now when all the revenues drop because you don't have anything to support the back end of it, the users, the administrators, the implementers?
yeah,
It's key.
well,
It is key.
it's exciting time to be alive, John.
It's crazy right now. It's crazy.
Well, thank you for coming on. I think we went a bit over time, but it was a good episode. I appreciate you coming on, and thank you so
Hey,
much.
thank you. I hope this was, honestly, I didn't hit this as good as what I thought. I studied this week, but boy, once this started, I was just, so I hope it's something that you find of quality, that you can share, that your listeners will find of quality.
Well, look, I'm going to stop the recording now.